Hey planner friends, I wanted to come on today to just do a really quick tutorial on how to cut out die cuts or even cut out an image so that you can make stickers with them. This really focuses on my method and how I do stuff for my die cuts, but like I said, it can apply to stickers as well if you want to use images from Pinterest or like this one, or maybe a business logo to make stickers. You can do this too. And I also had a question about it, about how I did it, so I offered to just make a really quick tutorial. So I will be using a few of these. I probably will do all. It just depends on how long this runs. But this is a doodle that I got custom made by Brandy on Instagram. This is my brother's logo for his shoe consignment store. This is something that I just grabbed off of Google. This is something I grabbed off of Pinterest, just to kind of give you a little bit of variances between pulling something out of a white background and then pulling something out of a colored black background like this. So let's go ahead and start with my Brandy doodle, because I actually do need to cut these out so that I can separate them and have them in my planners. So I'm just going to zoom in a little bit. So the tools that I'll be using to do this are going to be the trace tool and then the offset tool. So we'll go ahead over to the side here and select the trace tool. So this is what the trace tool looks like. I do have an updated version of Silhouette, so this might look different than yours does, but the tool icons are all the same. So once you select the trace tool, you'll come over here and hit select trace area. So when you hit select trace area, you will get this different type of cursor. And so this cursor is going to allow you to make a square or like basically a surface area to go around your image. So I'm going to close that out just because I was showing you guys that for an example. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull out the snow globe one. Now this doesn't have to be perfect when you drag this around your image, but I will say that you can move this around once you do it. So I'm just going to squeeze this up against this snow globe area. Make sure I don't get any of this character in there. I'm just going to tighten it up just like that. So one of the main things that you want to focus on is making sure that you get the full outline of the image that you're interested in cutting from a background. And to do so, you can see that it already defaulted and pretty much grasped everything that we need for the image. But if it doesn't, you would play with the threshold in order to kind of capture the image. So the more you play with this slider here, the higher it will go. So you don't typically need your image to look like this when you're tracing and detaching, but if you want to, you can. Most of the time, this might distort your edges of an image. Now, it doesn't do it for this one because it's round, but for something like this girl over here, it will distort the detailing in her afro. So let me just scale that down just a bit. And I want to say that on the older version of Silhouette, you will, I believe that one of these filters down here, either high pass or low pass, is defaulted and it is selected. What I've learned through other tutorials on YouTube is to deselect whichever one is defaulted and really just focus on threshold, because when you either use a high pass filter or low pass filter, it causes more distortion. So I'm happy with the amount of area that's shaded in here, and I'm literally going to just hit trace and detach. These other items won't really work well for a die cut. They don't for me, at least, especially when I'm pulling from a background, but it may work for you. But I'm showing you guys, this is what I do. So I'm going to go ahead and hit trace and detach. And so it looks like nothing happened, but to check, you'll just pull this image right on out. So there you have it. Your image is cut out. So I just want to zoom in so that you guys can see how crisp those edges are. There's no white around at all. So you have a really perfect die cut. So I'm sorry. Typically, if this is empty, you just would select it and then just hit delete. But since my other girl is still in there, I'm not going to delete it. I'll finish that up. I want to show you guys how you can do the same thing for words. And actually, I did do this for my brother's logo, specifically because I made stickers for his store. So again, we're just going to stay in the trace window. We're going to hit select trace area. You see how that cursor has changed. We're going to put a square right around the image like that. You can, like I said, you can play around with it. It doesn't even need to be this big. Really, you can just have it like this if you want it. Just like that, and it's still going to have the same effect. Now I can see in here that it's not capturing quite everything that I want, so I'm going to play with this threshold a little bit and just heighten it to make sure that red is covered with that yellow, because then I know it's captured every detail. You don't want to do too much because it might mess up my crisp edges in the letters, but we're just going to go down a little bit more. I think that's about good. And so we're going to do the same thing, hit trace and detach, and pull it right on out. Then I'm going to delete that. So as you guys can see, we're already zoomed in pretty well. Very crisp, and you can just play around with this. I mean, you can move this around if you want. You can angle it however you'd like. But me personally, when I'm doing stickers for him, it's very clean, cut, dry. I just cut it out of its white background, and then I duplicate this, and then I make, I set my cut lines. So let's take a stab at something with a colorful background, because sometimes this type of image, pulling it out of this background, kind of is a challenge. But if you do it right and you make sure that you don't play too much with the threshold slider, you should be okay. So as usual, we're going to go ahead and hit that select the trace panel tool. Then we're going to hit select trace area. We're going to go ahead and pull our square around it, and it's defaulted again to fill in that image, and it kind of already knows what we're trying to pull out. I think more so, Silhouette's smart enough to know that we're probably attempting to pull out the image that is in the center or sticks out or contrasts a lot with the background. So I'm gonna play with the threshold just a bit, but you have to be careful, because as you can see, when you're going up with a colorful background, you see how essentially it just overtook everything. So it looks like this one, we're just gonna have to make sure that our edges are as good as we can get, and that looks like about safe enough. So I'm going to hit trace and detach, and voila, pulls right out. So I'm gonna delete that. And then again, very crisp edges. Her afro is still very detailed, and it'll work out. So there's that one. And then finally, I'm just going to stick this over here. We're going to use this image that I actually have in my TN now from Pinterest. I did not create any of these images, and I've noted that. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing. Pull this trace window around the image. It defaulted and filled in what it thinks we want to pull out. I'm just going to play with it a little bit more. See, if you do too much, it completely distorts her hair, as you guys can see. I want to pull it back a little bit to make sure some of those little curls are still captured. So I think I'm going to do it till about there, and let's see how it turns out. We're going to hit trace and detach, and boom. Let's pull this out, delete that. It looks good. There's one area here, and I'm pulling it over to the side so you guys can kind of see. Let me zoom in over here. Oops. There's just this one little area right here that we didn't get cut out, and it's just white, but this is for personal use. Like I said, it's not my image. That's about as good as it's gonna get. So now the next step, let me just get all of my images here, my cut images, onto my cutting mat. Zoom back in. Sorry for jolting you guys around. Now, in order to get the white outline on the outer edge of your image, if you prefer that in die cuts, if you don't, then you would just select the image and put your cut lines on. But I first am going to go ahead and apply an offset. So we're going to come over here to the offset tool, which is right here, this star. The offset panel has either offset externally, which doesn't say that, but it defaults. The offset setting defaults as an external offset. So it's going to come on the outside of our image. And then you have internal offset, which means it's going to be inside of your image, which it wouldn't apply to me in any instance. So I always just use offset. So you always want to make sure you have your image selected that you want to apply the offset to, because if you don't have anything selected, these options turn off. Okay, so we're gonna add the offset to her. Let me just move her over here a little bit. I'm gonna select offset, and as you can see, as soon as I hit offset, this red line came around it. This is just a nice little border, and I feel like it's really important, especially for me, to give the silhouette the error room with that offset, because if you don't add an offset and it tries to cut around this image, more than likely it's going to cut into the design, and no matter how perfect you try to get your cutting mat or your sheet of paper that you're about to cut on your cutting mat, it's never going to be perfect. So having this offset just allows for that error that the silhouette, kind of will run into. So I typically don't want my offsets to be this large, especially not on a die cut. That's too much white space. So you can either use this slider here to decrease it or increase it, or you can use these up and down arrows. I just like to use the slider. So I actually always use 0.030. And I'll show you guys what that looks like. So there's what 0.030 looks like. If you go any larger, it's just kind of a lot. I mean, you can go huge. I mean, it's up to you, or you can go really tight. But even if you do really tight, it's kind of no point in doing offset. So, like I said, we're going to go ahead and put that back to 0.03. And then you can either do the sharp corner offset or the rounded corner offset. Now, she has lots of curves. I don't want any sharp corners because it's going to look weird. And it doesn't even look like it can add sharp corners to her anyway. So I always just leave mine on the rounded corner setting. I'm going to hit apply. So now we have our offset. But one thing that you need to do after you apply offset is group the image, because if you move this around to work on a new image, you've essentially moved that image away from its offset. That's why it's really important to group it. So I'm just going to undo that. So you can group it in two ways. I just like to slide up just like that. And you can double click or right click, or on my Mac, I have to click with 2 fingers. And you open up this option window and hit group right here. And then when you try and move your image, everything moves together. Okay. Or, let me undo that. Let me see. Did it come out? Oh, sorry guys, hold on. Okay, I think it's not out of it yet. Okay, let's see. Yeah, so now you can go ahead and grab both of the images again and navigate to up here. It looks like 2 squares inside of one another, and group it that way. And so you have 2 options. So now that that's grouped in that way, you can now, once you get all your images set up with their offsets or not, you can go into the design window, or not the design window, I'm sorry, the send window to apply the cut settings. So I always just, let me see here. I selected this image. I always cut edge, and I do full cuts for my die cuts, unless of course I'm creating stickers, then it would be, this would be set to sticker paper or whatever. Really, you can Google what the settings should be, and just to give you guys an idea of, if you don't put an offset on, how close a cut's going to be. This is how close that cut's going to be versus, you see the room that I have on this one. It's just kind of right up hugged against it, and I can do the same thing here to show you guys. It's going to cut off my entire black border, which takes away from the logo that my brother has had created. So I just wanted to come on here briefly and let you guys know that's how I create my die cuts. Again, this is also a method that you could use to create your images for stickers. And I hope that you guys really enjoyed this. If there's anything else that I've mentioned that I've done for something in Silhouette Studio that you guys would be interested in seeing me do, please let me know. Otherwise, if there's something that I can't do, I will direct you to a YouTube video that I've watched that will kind of resolve your question. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Bye-bye.